Thank you so much for clicking on this week's episode. Yes, you. I'm speaking to the individual that clicked on this episode, who's driving to work, sitting in the living room, wherever you are in the world. Today's story, or today's guest, I may say, is Jodeci Joseph. He is a tremendously inspiring individual, actually from England, who found out that he was Jewish well into his years of his life, which obviously shaped everything that happened from there. This is a phenomenal story. Buckle up and enjoy. Jodeci Joseph, thank you so much for joining me right now.
My pleasure.
This interview is something that I'm very excited about, and I have to give a shout out, obviously, to producer Yitzi behind the camera for making this one happen. I've actually never heard about you before today, and Yitzi sent me your contact about 2 months ago, and he's like, you have to interview Jodeci Joseph. And obviously we spoke a few days ago as we're getting ready for this episode, and I'm beyond excited to kind of go through your story and give the listeners and the people that are clicking on this episode a greater insight into who you are, because I think your story is very phenomenal. So
thank you.
If people could pick up on your accent a little bit.
Yes.
You're from England. So take me and the listeners back to the beginning. What was it like growing up? Take me through, like, let's say the first 10, 15 years of your life, and then we'll go from there.
For sure. First of all, I want to say a massive thank you for having me here. Very honored to be here with you. We've had great conversations. You're an amazing guy, and I really love the idea of what's going on here. So I think it's always important to start with one's parents. You know, that's where we're born. That's where we kind of originate from. And so, as you can say, I have an accent, a British accent. I'm from the UK, and my mother is actually from Stamford Hill, which I describe as like the borough park of London, the UK. It's a very Hasidish / Haredi area. And my mum grew up in a Hasidish Chabad environment. She's actually one of 14.
Wow.
Which is, I'm a teacher, so that's like a big class. It's crazy to have a house full of 14 children. And she grew up in a very Chabad religious school, you know, like learned a lot of Torah and wasn't, you know, kind of involved in society, going out as much, and like kind of really lived a very orthodox lifestyle. But people say about my mother is that, and people know her today, she does her thing. She does her thing in life. She's very strong-willed, and she's someone who is a very unique person who does her own thing a lot of the time. And my mum, being that personality, after a long while, she started to hang around in the, you know, with the non-Jewish crowd in Stamford Hill, and kind of got out of it, went to the cinema, which was kind of frowned upon in that time period and where she lived. And my grandfather is a rabbi and was actually a bit of a prominent figure in the community. And he was the head teacher of Lubavitch High School as well. So my mom was going through a bit of a conflict in her life, essentially. And so what happened is, you know, while mom was out, she ended up meeting this man. And this man happened to be Nigerian also, which I don't really think fits the criteria of a great shidduch in Stamford Hill. And this Nigerian man soon became her spouse.
And was he Jewish?
He was not Jewish.
Gotcha.
This Nigerian man was not Jewish, and soon became her spouse. And because of this, she had to leave the community, essentially, because she was with a non-Jewish person. And I think the fact that he was obviously Nigerian black obviously stood out more, and kind of, you know, stood out to people that this person wasn't Jewish, and it made her kind of leave the community as she was no longer accepted. And so she moved to an area called Woolwich, which is like Arsenal. A lot of people who watch Arsenal Football Club know this place called Woolwich. And she brought me and my siblings up in this place called Woolwich, where there was nothing Jewish around. It was in the middle of nowhere. And I didn't know I was Jewish for the first few years of my life. But I was very close to my parents, and we had a very nice life. I had great friends. And we grew up not knowing we were Jewish. And I say it's really funny because in school, in this non-Jewish, I'd say elementary school for all the Americans out there, I was actually put in the play as Jesus. That was my main character. And it was a Jew. I said it's like foreshadowing in a way, because he's Jewish. It was kind of like, maybe this, you know, it's funny when you look back in hindsight, because he's Jewish anyway, so it kind of worked out. And we basically celebrated a very traditional Christian life, I would say. the UK is set up in a way where it's a Christian culture. So, we celebrated Christmas and we celebrated Easter. Great, Easter, a lot of chocolate eggs. And Christmas, you had presents. So I wasn't complaining as a young person. And so that was my reality. I thought I lived a Christian traditional lifestyle, and I had all my friends from elementary school, and I had a very, very happy life as a young person. And I was thinking to myself, people are very close with their grandparents. I have friends that are close with their grandparents, they're close with their cousins. In the Jewish world, family is a huge value, with people with their friends, the family, gatherings. And I was thinking to myself, actually, recently, I was like, wasn't in touch with my cousins because my family from my dad's side in Nigeria, they were in Nigeria. And then my mum's side, we weren't in touch with. So it was me, my 3 siblings. I'm one of 4. I'm the oldest. It was me and my siblings and my parents. That was my life until the age of 11. And that's where things started to really drastically change.
Got you. I have to ask, is that, as you said a second ago, is your dad's family, they were in Nigeria, so you didn't keep in touch with them. And then your mom's family, you had no relationship with. But for those years, as you said, you grew up Christian, basically being raised as a Christian, and you never knew you were Jewish. But did it ever cross your mind to at least ask the questions of hey, mom, who are your parents? Where, that never came up?
Honestly, no, because I think when you're very young, you don't, in elementary school, you're kind of just living in the moment. You're not thinking too much on a philosophical, analytical level about how do I exist in the context of my family. And it was all I knew. And so I thought that was honestly normal. When you grew up in a world where you have your parents and your siblings and that's where you live, that's what you know. And even the friends I had, I didn't really see their grandparents or didn't see their cousins because you're still at a young age. So for me, this felt like a very normal family situation. Oh. As an age. It's crazy to think. I never thought what a grandparents or what a cousins, that never occurred to me because I never knew that was a thing that existed because all the people I knew, I only saw their siblings or their parents, right? Wow. So I had no context outside of this siblings and parents, which is kind of crazy to think about now because I can't imagine people I know and how close they are with other family and now I know my cousins. It's very interesting to think about.
1,000%. So now that obviously, as you answer the question and you were saying before, you were raised kind of this way until you were 11. What happens then? Take me through that part.
So at 11, I'd say this is one of the biggest turning points in my life and obviously still influences me till today very much and infuses everything that I am and what I believe in. And so when I was 11 years old, my mum called me into a room with my siblings and sat us down. And I really remember the room. It was a small couch. It was we were all sitting there. It was just a very eerie atmosphere in the room. You can sometimes when things happen in life, when you can feel something coming, you can almost sense an energy in the air. And so my mum sat us down and she said, guys, I have something to tell you. I was a naughty, I thought, maybe I'm getting a new gift or something cool's happening. I'm what's, you're 11 years, I'm 11 years old. I'm what's happening? I'm really excited to hear what's going on. I said, you guys are Jewish. And we all stopped. I stopped and I was like, okay, cool. It literally meant nothing to me. It was just hearing a word. Imagine someone said bananas to you. That's what it's like. Okay, bananas. At least you have a concept of bananas. Mm-hmm. What is Judaism? I never even knew that. I didn't know what Judaism was. I didn't know that Jewish was a religion. I've never heard of the word Jew. I didn't hear the word Jewish before. I didn't have no idea. But then it wasn't only the breaking of the news that I'm Jewish now. It was also the fact that she said, we are now going to move to a Jewish area and we want to start living a Jewish lifestyle. So I think that's when I was really triggered. I would say the first part of me being told I was Jewish, I had a very apathetic reaction. Okay, cool. It's just a word. But then when I was told that I was going to be moving to this Jewish area, I had a really big meltdown because I had all my friends, I had everything I knew, I had my social setup. I was actually very happy and had a very good childhood. I had a very good life. I had very good friends. And I'm like, why are we moving to another area for this word or Judaism that I have no context of? And was a lot of anger towards my mum. And not only that, my dad had his job in the area where he was, and he didn't come with because he had to make a living. So we also were leaving my father at the time. So this was a huge kind of shock to me and left me in a very upset place with a lot of resentment of this whole move for something I didn't even know existed, essentially.
Where do you think that came from, though? Like, your mom was, obviously, as you said before, she grew up with one of 14 kids. And then she kind of goes off and marries someone who's not Jewish and doesn't really live a Jewish lifestyle. And then all of a sudden one day it's like, oh, I'm just going to sit my kids down, tell them they're Jewish, and then move to a Jewish community. Well, like, where do you think that came from?
So it was interesting because a few months ago I spoke about this and someone asked me this question. I didn't have an answer because I never asked my mum.
Wow. Did you ask her?
Yeah. So then after that, I realized I can sit here and theorize all I like, but I'm just going to go ask my mother. And so I asked her, and what she said essentially was that in the non-Jewish community, she didn't really have a community. Like, she didn't feel supported. She didn't feel like we had that community that we could lean on, that we could connect with, that we could build a life and memories with. And she felt very alone because there's millions of Christians. Like, it's like when, being a Christian in that part of the world doesn't make you unique or unite a group of people when everyone's like basically part of that group. It doesn't really reunite them on a smaller kind of capsule level. And so she said that the biggest thing that was missing was community. That was the first thing. The second thing she also said is that I was coming up to my bar mitzvah. I was the oldest. And it was a big milestone of my life. I'm 11 years old. My bar mitzvah was 2 years after that.
Wow.
And she's like, I think she came to terms with the fact that she does appreciate Judaism to some degree, and she wants me to have some of the milestones of being a Jew. And I think those two combined factors was the push to say, you know what, we need to go and explore this more. So that was very interesting because I was like, 2 years later, I'm having my bar mitzvah. It's crazy. So I think they're the reasons that she decided to do this. She didn't think it through. I don't know if she understood the practical implications of the decision, but I guess she went with her heart, which my mom does. She went with her heart and she went with her passion, and she decided this for us.
So now that she's made that decision, and then, as you were saying before, you had like a good flow. You had your friends, you had everything you needed, and then that gets completely uprooted. So what happens from there when you kind of get into the Jewish community?
So this is where things get really crazy in a way, because you start off when you hear the idea that you're Jewish and you're moving, it's still very theoretical. And you go through the wave of emotions of like, I've got everything here, why am I moving? So I'm very angry at this point. It's like that kind of denial/anger phase. Is it actually going to happen? And then when you're there, it's like, this is now the reality of where I am. This is the reality. And so I remember so vividly on my first day I was in the last year of elementary school, but all my younger siblings were also in the younger years of this school called Ilford Jewish. Well, first of all, we went to Essex. That was the place. My mum moved us to Essex, Gants Hill, which at the time was one of the biggest Jewish communities in the UK. Like how North London is today, like Hendon, Golders Green. Everyone knows, everyone who asks me a question, are you from the UK? From London? Are you from Golders Green or Hendon? That's the order. It's like UK, London, Golders Green, Hendon. I'm like, but there's other places, right? Mm-hmm. I'm from, have you heard of Essex?
Never.
I mean, people in London who hear of Essex, they always laugh when they hear Essex because it's not it's not the nicest place in the world. But essentially, it was one of the fastest growing Jewish communities at the time. And my mum sent us to an Orthodox Jewish primary school. So that was obviously from not knowing anything to now going to this place, which is now Orthodox. It was crazy. So me and my siblings, I remember our first day of, we called it year 6, which is grade 6 or year 6. On our first day, we walk in. Me and my siblings walking together. It was kind of cool. It was like walking in together, like this family, this unit, starting our first day. It was like kind of
out of the movies.
Yeah, like cinema, the lights. And we walk in, and I remember this. It's crazy. Everyone, like literally, everyone was like, it's like the first day of school, so it's like busy. And everyone stopped. Okay, I think it's people still talking, but like a lot of people stopped and stared at us, stared at me and my siblings. And then I started to see these people, everyone would have these like strings coming down from their waists, and they had this circular piece of material on their heads, which I'm wearing now. And all I could think to myself is, where am I? I felt as if a UFO, maybe from Elon Musk or whatever, dropped me and my siblings in this playground. I felt like an alien. I felt completely different to everyone else. I felt completely uncomfortable. I think the fact that we were black as well also added to the like how uncomfortable I felt, because we were the only black kids in the school as well. And it was a very, very difficult moment for me in a way, because I'm like, why? Why are we here? What are we doing? And at the time, you don't realize, like, now think about it, it's like, that's crazy. We only found out we were Jewish, and now we're in the school. And I'm like, at the time, it was like, I didn't think about all those things, but I felt it, that this is crazy. But I felt crazy for thinking crazy at the time. And it was a very difficult year for me. Very difficult. People had some racist comments from some of the young kids. I would actually sit on my own a lot at lunchtime, for a while. I felt very different, and I felt different. And I think it was very hard for me to adjust. And my siblings were having a very difficult time, because, you know, we started with daven. They davened every morning. You know, they prayed morning prayer every morning, and they benched after lunch. I'm like, what is going on? Like, who does this? Who says like 10-minute prayer after you eat lunch? Like, who spends mornings like just praying? Like, and everyone's got this siddur. They used to give me this, so I had no idea. Like, they gave every kid had to have a siddur, their own siddur. I'm like, what is this? Like, because in my old area, I used to do choir. I was like on the Christian school, so we used to sing hymns, and it used to be like, used to have all the subtitles on the thing, and you used to sing, and it had a piano guy and everything, you know. And I'm going from that to like shacharis and like the Amida. Like, this is like opposite. It's like quiet. Where's the singing? Where's the dancing? And so it was very, very difficult transition for me that first year, essentially. Mm-hmm. So that was my first day. So now that obviously you kind of make that switch, you get to the Jewish world and you feel like an outsider, and then you have a hard time in the beginning. Did you have a period where it was like, now it clicked, like I'm rolling? Like, how long did that take you? And then kind of take me a little bit as you got older from there. Yeah, so I think after a few months, I made some friends, so that was nice. But my mum also sent us to Cheder, like a Chabad Sunday school every Sunday, which was also crazy, because like I'm like learning the Aleph base from scratch, and I was obviously not as motivated to learn it as well, so it was very difficult to stay motivated. But I picked up some of the letters and the culture, but I still was. It was a massive transition, and I think for me, the part where I think I started to feel more confident and in my element was when I got to high school, because in high school it was a bit less religious, and there were reform, conservatives, like all different types. It wasn't just orthodox there. And it was more traditional. Like, people didn't necessarily keep Shabbat, and people didn't necessarily, you know, it was very traditional. So it was like kind of closer to like a more secular lifestyle. Mm-hmm. So from the lifestyle perspective, I didn't feel so alien, right? The fact I was the only black kid was still very difficult for me from that sense. But I would say it wasn't as the Jewish piece wasn't as intense anymore. because that wasn't the only focus. It was, you had your friends. It was more like Jewish by culture. You know, like you go to these parties, like we're Jews having a party, as opposed to like we're Jews sitting in shul learning. So it was like it was kind of like a cultural Jewish group as opposed to a religious part. So that I felt at that point, I felt more that I can find ways to connect because I'm Jewish. If I'm Jewish, then I'm in this group. So then I didn't feel like I didn't feel out of it because the cultural elements were kind of more natural. And it's actually interesting. I forgot to mention that when we first came, my mum actually made us keep Shabbat, like at the beginning, and made us go to shul every week. So that was also quite intense because it was kind of a moment from this like 360, and all of a sudden I'm like, I can't have phones on Saturday. Like, can't use TVs. We can't use that on Saturdays. Like, so we were very angry about that. Like imagine you're like not using technology for 25 hours for no reason. Young people, we love to game. We love to play FIFA. I was like so excited to play FIFA. And it's my weekend. I can't play FIFA. What's going on? Why are we not playing FIFA?
Right, you have it, and then it gets taken away.
Like I had no reasons of what Shabbat was or like this whole thing. It's just like I think my mum liked the quality time because we played board games. But anyway, so back to high school, and I felt like I was really becoming a bit more popular. I was very charismatic and a bit of a cheeky young one, and so I would mess around a lot in school. I'd be out of lessons more than I'd be in them. I started to got involved in sport, as we spoke about, basketball, big basketball player. So I was just getting more involved in the social element, and I started to gel a bit more, I would say, at this point, and I started to flow. And then, as after a few years, 2-3 years of really being in the flow and messing around, really getting involved in everything, things started to, get a bit more difficult for me. But I would say that's where I started to get into the flow, where I was in this school that was a little bit less religious, and I started to feel much more comfortable around everyone and started to make friends and started to get a bit more used to the idea of going to the synagogue. And I said it took me about 2 to 3 years to start feeling more settled.
Wow. So it's interesting because as you said before, when you first came to the Jewish community, your mom made you keep Shabbos. And then it's like, what the heck am I doing? And then you kind of like get thrown into the Jewish world, but it was, I guess, a blessing in disguise in a certain way that the high school you went to was a little bit of a more, call it like an open area, safe space type of situation that allowed you to kind of figure out you're at least feeling more of that Jewish pride type of situation. You said a second ago also that you kind of got into high school, you kind of got a little more adjusted, and then it got a little more difficult. So kind of take me through what happens there. Yeah.
So this was actually, I'd say another big turning point in terms of my emotional my identity and who I was and confidence, I would say. Because I'm under the impression when I think back at it that all of the confidence that I displayed for the beginning of high school wasn't real. Meaning it was like an external confidence. I was this black kid who wanted to just be liked and loved and accepted. I'm sure many people can relate to this idea of just wanting to fit in, wanting to be accepted by those around you. And sometimes when we want to be that, we overcompensate because we feel less, and we overcompensate in the way we behave. So I would say I was a very excitable person, and I think a lot of that was delicate confidence anyway. And so I just felt that for 2 to 3 years, even though I felt I was flowing, it was really coming from a big place of insecurity and really wanting to be accepted by the Jewish white people around me. And so what I'm about to talk about kind of really exposed that lack of identity, lack of feeling safe, lack of confidence that I had underneath. And so when I was 14 and I was coming back from summer vacations, summer holidays, I saw a teacher in school who was quite high up in the school. And he looked at me and he said, "Where were you all summer?" And as a joke, he said, "Were you in prison?" And I was like, in my head, I was like, it's not a funny joke. I'm saying, I've heard funny jokes. This was not a funny joke. And in fact, it was the opposite. And because I was so I would say subconsciously on a deep level aware of the fact I was dark skinned and that I was trying to compensate for that. And I think this just triggered something in me that I can't overcompensate for this. I can't hide this. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not worthy. Maybe there's something inherently wrong with me. Maybe I'm not Jewish. And maybe, I don't know, maybe there's something I'm missing. And so I remember I went home that evening and I was crying literally all day, crying. And I'm not a big crier. My wife says to me, the only time you cried is when you watch High School Musical. So I'm not a big crier. Like, I don't cry often. She always tells me, like, you never cried. But I cried. I cried for a long time. But at one point, I had this kind of moment of just stopping for a second. I said, you know what? No. What this teacher said to me is not going to define who I'm going to be in the future, who I'm going to be moving forward. This is not going to create the path of who Jodeci is going to be in the future. And so I actually started to use it as fuel to say, well, I'm going to prove him wrong, because I'm a bit of a stubborn akshan, very stubborn person. I'm like, I'm going to prove this guy wrong. And that became like my driving force to start improving. And I went from bottom set to top set in all my subjects. I really started to improve. A few years later, I became deputy prefect, or deputy head boy in the school. And it's very funny because like Barack Obama was here at the time, and people would refer, and I dressed up as Barack Obama for Purim, and it was kind of like this head of in a higher position, like kind of like I played on that whole. And again, that's the whole point, as I still kept referring back to this, me being dark skinned, making it out like, and I felt like even though that's why I said it's important to measure before, that even though I had confidence externally, it was, even though I had started to improve, it was still delicate confidence. It was just a different external, I was just using a different external point of reference, which was now, before it was a student and now it was his teacher. And so it was always delicate, but from the results perspective, I was killing the game. You know, I was got really good grades, doing really well. I was very popular. There was, from a kid who's 16, 17 at the time, there's really nothing more you could want, right? This is a great life right now. Sporty, I've got my friends. But as you know, sometimes when you're feeling at the apex of things, that's when things normally go a bit more downhill.
So what happens at that point? Obviously, you go from the bottom and you get kind of to the top and all is good. Take me what happens next.
So, as you know, I've had some big pieces of news in my life. I've received big pieces of news. The fact I was Jewish was is not news people get every day. They get told that. And so 17 is a point where I'm just kind of developing my identity and who I am. And my mum pulls me again. It wasn't the same room, by the way. It was a different couch, a different room. And I'm just at like towards the end of my high school. So like getting ready to do my A-levels, which are the grades you do, like your SATs before university. So it's quite a pivotal time of one's life. And I just got to a point where I was feeling good about myself and where I was. And she sat me down and said, Joe, I've got something. I don't know if she said Joe, but I've got something to tell you. And she said, your dad isn't really your biological father. And at that moment, everything changed. I spoke about being Jewish was a big change, right? Being told I was Jewish. And I guess that's a huge change because that's your whole lifestyle and your identity. But I think this was like shattering, reality shattering. It shatters one's view and perspective of what they consider life and everything they've known until now. And it shatters that perspective of what life is. And so at that moment, I think the world around me crumbled because my base level of who I was no longer a foundation. And so already having delicate confidence and not knowing who I was, still battling with this whole Jewish lifestyle and where do I fit in, coupled with the fact that who I believe to be a biological parent is no longer it isn't a biological parent, threw me into the darkest period of my life, which was essentially 2 to 3 years of being in a very, very dark place, essentially, where I wasn't coming to school as often. I was at home all the time, really in my own head, essentially, and trying to process, not really succeeding in processing all of this, and went through a 2 to 3 year just period of being at home a lot, being a lot in solitude. You know, I'd had friends come visit me, but I was in a very, very dark place for a very long period of time, which felt kind of hopeless at the time. Felt like there was no way out. I didn't know who I was, where I was, lost trust in who I really was. And I take a lot of myself as well. I'm a bit more of an internalizer. Some people express a lot. When they feel vulnerable, they express it and everyone needs to know about it. And there's other people who they won't express, and that they find it hard to express it. So I took everything on my own shoulders. And me being the oldest of the siblings, I also had that responsibility growing up as well. Being the oldest, I was kind of responsible for my siblings. I would take them to school, I'd take them home. So I felt like I had the whole world on my shoulders at this point in time. And I didn't know how to deal with it. So I just kind of cooped up and was in this the hardest time in my life.
So I want to kind of get a little more into that. When you found out, obviously, that your father that you've basically been raised by is not your real father, obviously you're crushed by the news. Did you now say to yourself, like, I want to go find out who my dad was? Like, did you find out that information who your real dad was? Did you try to go contact him? Or were you just in such a dark place that didn't even come across your mind?
So I would say it didn't actually come into my mind too much at the beginning, because you're still kind of processing what it is that you've just heard for a long time. But what happened is that my biological father's in Nigeria, but his siblings lives in London. His brothers live in London. So we kind of got in touch with them a bit, and I would see them a little bit and see these cousins that I now had, which was very crazy kind of journey for me of like meeting this family who resemble my biological father. But if I'm truly honest, I actually in a way gained a lot more respect for my stepdad in a weird way. I was kind of like, I had a lot of guilt, to be honest, at the beginning. Like, you know, he did all of that for me. Like I'm not his biological son. So I had a lot of, I think that's also part of, like, when you process something, all different things come up. Mm-hmm. So it's like, who am I? What's my heritage? But also like this person, my dad, who I call dad, has been doing everything for me since the age of 2. And I felt a kind of guilt and like I felt like I owed him, you know, something. So I went through a lot of that sort of journey. And so I think I was kind of more grateful towards my dad. And my biological father, I didn't think about too much. And I'm the sort of person, I'm like, I don't really have too much, I don't really express anger. So I never thought, oh, like, where did he go? Like, what? I wasn't angry at all. I was more like mellow and just kind of like sad and not knowing where I was in a way. And I've heard that my biological father isn't so well. And so it was like that, you know, he isn't really in a place to have a relationship. And I didn't really think about that piece too much, if I'm honest. It was more just about who am I, where am I going to go, and where does this leave me in this world? I wasn't thinking too much. My brain went into shutdown, essentially. Again, later on, you know, which we'll get to, is when I had a therapist and when I started to explore my emotions, a lot more was able to be explored. But for the first year, I think, and also it was a period of time, it wasn't like was told that the next day I went through this period. It was like a buffer period, like a few months. You're like not really processing. I think when she told me, I didn't even really I was like, oh, that's cool. Like I kind of didn't, like when I found out I was Jewish, I didn't really give it the energy. But then like 2-3 months, all of a sudden my whole life, I'm like out. Mm-hmm. So my body and my mind obviously subconsciously is trying to process this information. But I was kind of like,
you're out of it. You're checked out, right? So I mean, it's great that I'm glad that you're kind of mentioning that part, because when you take all the stuff in, as you were saying before, the way you process things is you keep things internal. So for a lot of people that are around you, they probably couldn't pick up the fact that you were going through a lot of these things. So this 2 to 3 year period of your life that you were in a very dark place, in your room a lot, how did you kind of get out of that, and what happens from there a little bit? Yeah.
So, I mean, just like thinking about that period is very difficult, because, you're in a place where you're only having negative thoughts, and you're just, and nothing seems hopeful. So it was just such a traumatic period of time. But there was like one day where I started to realize that, doctors couldn't help me, friends and families. Like, you'd have temporary moments of feeling a bit of joy, but then you wouldn't. And then I started to have this really deep realization at this age, which I think kind of turned me into because beforehand I wasn't like a deep philosophical person. I was just having a good time, just having jokes, always just joking around about things, which I never thought about things in a deep way, right? Like about what is this world? What am I doing with my life? Midot, character traits, like you just like. But then I realized I had a lot of time to think, because you're alone for a lot of period of time, and time goes super slow in those situations, and you have a lot of time with yourself and your own brain. And I got to a point where I had this like really deep realization: no one can help me. No one can get me out of this. That's not a solution. I felt, at least I was like kind of relying on people to make me feel better. And I realized they're not going to help me. These things that I'm relying on, they're not going to actually solve the issue of what's going on inside of me. So one day I was in such desperation, but I had this realization, and I ran to the local field. I remember it was like just before sunset. It was like kind of getting darker. I remember this was a big turning for the positive, I would say. And I sat in this park, and no one was there. It was a huge field. No one was there. And I was actually crying so much, like just bawling. And I was kind of talking to Hashem. I don't know why I was doing this. I just started to talk to the sky, to like just the field, and to God, and I said, like, God, if you get me better, like if you help me improve, I promise you, I'm gonna dedicate my life to getting close to you, and also to helping others in this situation, or who struggle, and trying to be a good person. Because up until now, I use a lot of my confidence and charisma to mess around, essentially, and to do the wrong things, and to maybe bully people and put people down and make myself feel better, because I had this delicate ego and delicate confidence that I would use my confidence for really kind of not such good things. And so I said to Hashem, if you get me out of this, I promise you I'm going to dedicate my life to helping people, to being closer to you, and I think that agreement I made, again, I got to a point where sometimes in life you have to go to zero to realize that we have everything, right? And I think I needed just to be cleansing time of just to really 2-3 years of pure time with myself, to just being in a dark place puts you in a room where you're like, no one can help me. Like, shit, like God, right? Can help me feel this and help me get to the next level. And so that was a kind of trigger to recovery.
It's crazy because, as you're saying, you went out to a field in the middle of nowhere, and you look up to the sky and you're like, if someone's listening to me, basically, like, help me out, and it's at that age, I don't think a lot of people do that. And another interesting point that I think you touch on is that since you were in this place by yourself for 2 or 3 years, you're kind of forced to be really inside yourself and get in touch with who you really are, and kind of work through those insecurities. And at this point in your high school, like, what happens as you end off high school, and obviously, like, you know, you're religious now, Baruch Hashem, you have tzitzis, you have yarmulke, you live in Israel. So take me through the path of, were you religious still at that time? Like, when did you slowly begin to get more into it and kind of go from there?
Yeah, so it was a very long journey of kind of recovery. But what I'd started to do is obviously I was starting to go back. I went back to my exams. I was able to finish my exams. But I decided, you know what? Everyone goes to university at this point. I was definitely not in a place to go to university. Mentally, like, just what had happened to me. So I needed a year out. And during this year out, like a kind of gap year, I worked in an elementary school as an assistant, basically, in this, like, with like 2-3-year-olds, like infants. And I loved it because I'd always had, I think, a talent for working with young people. I think that's kind of, my grandfather was a teacher, like, he was a head teacher of a school. So like it runs in my family to be an educator, essentially, to educate, to influence, to lead. And so I was in this elementary school and I was still like recovering. I wasn't fully, I was really kind of in a delicate place, but I was at a place where I could start getting out a bit more and start exposing myself. And so I worked in this elementary school, but at the same time as well, because all my friends were away, I didn't have my community, my friends. So I got involved in a Jewish organization called the JLE, Jewish Learning Exchange, because I was in London and all my friends went to Nottingham or Birmingham, like different universities across the country. But London still had a big university presence. But no one who's in London really wants to, I was from like a non-religious Jewish crowd. So they don't want to stay in London because it's like, they're not thinking about Shabbat and all the things that you need to be local for. Mm-hmm. They're just going out to party in Nottingham or Birmingham. But all the people that would stay in London are mostly the religious students. So these events had a lot of North London religious students come to them. So because of my friends who weren't religious, who were away, I kind of naturally moved towards going to this organization and trying to build myself a friendship group or community. And so it's called the Jewish Learning Exchange. It's in Golders Green. It's like it's like an Aish style Kiruv program where they do really exciting programs. And so all I heard was the free food. At this point, I wasn't religious, right? At this point, I wasn't into Judaism. I believed in God, I would say, and I was open. I was spiritually open and in like a bit of a deep kind of open place. And so I went to this place on a Tuesday night. They told me free food, good speak. I'm like,
oh,
of course, yeah, free food. And I went there and I walk in and I walk upstairs and I get greeted by this soon to be, who I knew to be Rabbi Sands. His name's Rabbi Sands. And he was a very warm person, South African. And so we're talking and he says, I'm African, I'm South African. I said, I'm African too. And like, we just kind of connected. Like, he laughed because it's just a funny comment to say, you know, like I have these, I always say, my wife always says I say the wrong thing. I always say the wrong thing. This was the right thing at the time, but I always say these random comments that are just not necessarily always the best situation, but this worked out really well, this comment. And so he really took me under his arm. You know, I listened to a speaker and then after he said he wanted to learn Derech Hashem. And like Derech Hashem is a great book to start with by the Ramchal because it's all about the fundamental philosophy of Judaism, right? And so I never really was exposed to that, the philosophical, spiritual part of Judaism. I was exposed to the cultural element, you know, the festivals and donuts and Hanukkah. It's amazing, it's fun, but you're not getting that deep connection. Mm-hmm. And I'd obviously from what I'd gone through, I became a bit more of a more philosophical thinker. So we started to learn Derech Hashem. And I remember just sitting and learning with the rabbi, and something in my heart, I actually felt something in my heart just clicked. Like I felt some sort of connection. Like this is exactly where I need to be. That's what I felt. So natural. So, you know, in those days, there was a lot of like atheism going around and a lot of arguments and debates. Is God real? And then you have the Great Partnership by Rabbi Sachs, and you have all these arguments and like science proves religion. And for me, it was just heart. Just everything I've been through, I felt this was the place when I said I wanted to connect to God more. This is where I need to be. It wasn't like logically, it was just a very passionate experience when I learned this sefer, this book with my rabbi, I fell in love essentially with the concept of philosophical spiritual Judaism. And so over the weeks, I started to learn more and more and more. And I kind of got a bit obsessed, like motivation wise for this. And then I started to go there on Shabbats, like it kind of built up. And I had a really good friend who, his name's Joseph Perez, he's French. We kind of met because he was in Hasmo, but he was kind of involved with the Essex crowd. So I met him once or twice and we got really friendly. And he lives in Golders Green, a French family, French Tunisian family.
Wow.
And I used to go, and then I started to go there every Shabbat to his house. And as I explained to you, it was kind of nice because they spoke French. So like, it was kind of nice because I could relax, you know, like I didn't speak French. So like every now and then they'll be like, Joe, are you here? Like, yeah, I'm here, don't worry.
Wow.
So it was nice. But I basically started to become really into it before I went to university, which is where I went from, well, university, we'll talk about soon, which was more kind of spreading the Judaism. This was more just building my connection to God, which I said I was going to do when I was in that field. This was the first part. There was two parts, and I'm thinking about this now. I never thought about this before, but when I was in that park, there was two parts to the deal. You know, sign the contract, everything in the park, you know. And the first part was to come closer to God, right? To be close to you, whatever that meant. And the second part was to help other people, spiritually, emotionally, whatever it be. So this was the first part, learning Derech Hashem. And that summer I actually so I asked the rabbi, I want to go to yeshiva. My mum found this very difficult, obviously.
It matters. I was you preemptively asked that, answer that question of like, you're beginning to go through this religious journey. And also for anybody that's listening to this that doesn't understand what you were saying, the book in Hebrew is called Derech Hashem. If anybody wants to look it up, they type up on Google, The Way of God. I believe that's just how you translate the book. Phenomenal book. And honestly, it's sitting on my shelf and I think you just gave me a reason to pick it up. So appreciate that one. I was going to say at this point, like, you're about to go into university and you're essentially filling up your own cup to then be able to give over to other people. So when you asked the rabbi to go to yeshiva, take me through that with your mom and him, and then how you essentially came to Israel to learn yeshiva.
Yeah. I think my mom found it very difficult because I think she didn't really expect any of us to go down the religious route, like more the culturally Jewish, already married Jewish girl. Like, I think that was her goal, to keep Judaism within the family. So for me to now kind of tell her that I'm exploring the more religious side, she was kind of fearful. I think she was scared she was going to lose her son, like, to this religious world. And also that she didn't want me to lose myself or be like influenced too much to not understand what it is. And to be honest, I was quite cheeky. I made a joke, and it's quite a funny joke actually, but she didn't appreciate it. One day she said, Joe, your room's really messy. You didn't clean it up. I said, I thought God was going to clean it up. She didn't appreciate that. At that age, I was a jokey person, right? And she didn't appreciate that, right? But that's just a funny moment I remember.
You got real faith. What can I say?
Yeah. But it was just like a very funny moment because I just remember like my mom just having a go at me at that point. But again, put that aside. That wasn't the reason she didn't. She was just very, very difficult for her to accept that my life's gonna be very different, and she thought that meant I was leaving. Like that, me adopting this lifestyle meant that I was gonna isolate her. That's what she felt at the beginning. And my dad loves Jews. He wears kippah sometimes. It's very funny. And he puts Jewish music on. He's the biggest Zionist in the world. But he loves Israel. And he said, he was actually finding it very difficult. So he's like, Joe, why can't you have a filet fish in McDonald's? Like, we used to get McDonald's. And I'm like, because I also started to become kosher a little bit. And he's like, why can't you eat here? And he's like, he didn't understand I was taking on all these Jewish laws. So they were very, very difficult for them. But I was always respectful. I was always very respectful about it and like didn't force it on anyone around me and stuff. And so, yeah, it was very difficult for her.
Wow.
That obviously changed after she saw it was real. But at the beginning it was she didn't want me to go to yeshiva. She was very against it. Obviously, my mum's obviously a big believer of like, I do want my children to do what they want at the end of the day. So she was never going to stop me. but she verbally expressed how she felt strongly.
Wow. So
And obviously, you know, I had a big tough period beforehand. So she was obviously really protecting of me and my identity. And she knew that I had a tough period of time.
I can imagine. I mean, and obviously we'll get to the next thing, but like when you have a child that goes through that tough time and then all of a sudden the door to Judaism starts opening up, and I'm sure your mom had a lot of her own personal baggage from the Jewish world that she grew up in. It's a scary thing to be willing to say, go off to Israel and go study. You know what I'm saying? So take me through that. Now that you go through that with your parents, they know, that you're beginning to make these changes. How do you get to Israel? What happens when you're here?
Yes, I also want to touch a bit on university as well.
Oh,
I think
yes.
I think that's a good point. I think because that kind of connects, it is kind of connected. And so university was kind of the first point where I'd kind of left this bubble of Golders Green, where I was going to Shabbats every week, and I kind of went to university campus. And I would say this is, I'm really proud of myself actually for this, is the way I took on Judaism was so strategic. Like I started off not eating non-kosher meat for like a year. And then, so I only had fish. Then I didn't have no fish, like I really slowly built everything, which I was really proud of myself in hindsight. But I was already not eating non-kosher meat when I first went to university. So I was already really involved in making this a part of my life even more. But when I was in university, and I wore a kippah at university, I wore a bright orange kippah at university, which is really funny. And these sits there were so long, down to my shoes, this bright orange kippah. And I was the only visibly Jewish person at the campus, visibly Jewish. And it was so visibly because I was black, had an orange kippah. It's just like this big personality, like just everyone saw me. And I kind of represented this kind of like Jewish being on campus. And there was a Jewish society, but it wasn't really active. There was hardly any Jews. There wasn't any atmosphere around it. And after my first year, someone begged me to take on the Jewish society, my second year. And I said, no, I can't. No, I don't want to do it. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want the responsibility. I didn't want to take on this role. But he sat me down, two people, they kind of like all ganged up on me. It was like, if you don't run this Jewish society, no one will. There'll be no Jewish life at campus. It's not going to be here. Then I felt, okay, fine. I was like, it's a lot of pressure, but if no one's, if I don't do a great job or it doesn't do anything, then at the end of the day, it wasn't going to be here anyway, right? That was kind of my thinking. But thankfully enough, I was in touch with all these rabbis in Golders Green, and I was quite good at networking. So I'd bring a lot of Jewish people on campus to speak, and I would run around looking for Jews and have stands. And like, I actually built it to like 20, 30 people, which was really cool. But there was one moment at university which was kind of very kind of classic Hashgacha Pratit, divine providence moment. And I was at a club, because I was still clubbing these days, even though I had my bright orange kippah on. I was on a journey. I was kind of in between. Mm-hmm. I was on the border. And when we were outside, I saw this guy, we're talking, and he's someone I've spoken to about the Jewish side before. I didn't know he was Jewish even, because I would also invite people who weren't Jewish to come as well to see what Judaism was about. And he's talking to me, I'm asking about his heritage. I don't know how that happens at a club, but we're talking. And he tells me about his great-grandmother is Israeli. So I said, like, from your mum's side? He said, yeah, my great-grandmother's Israeli. And my mum's like Israeli as well, but like, from the great-grandmother, I said, sorry, I've got something to tell you. I'm saying I've got to break some news to you. If you're, in Judaism, it goes by your mum. So you're Jewish. And he was like, I haven't been baptized yet. It was just like a really funny comment. Like, I was like, oh, okay, come to the Jewish society, I'll tell you more. But it was like such a 360 moment. And I was like, Hashem's funny sometimes. Like, it was a really funny moment, because like, it was like, I don't need logic to believe like God's real. Like, I'm now telling someone they're Jewish when I was told I was Jewish when I was 11. And that was a very big 360 moment for me. And I would do Shabbat dinners, and I really liked my family Chabad. So I kind of liked the Chabad approach of being outreach and kind of helping people get closer. And anyway, it doesn't have to be necessarily in a religious way, but just creating a warm atmosphere. And so that's where I kind of started to go out a bit more. And this led me to going to Israel, because I was now coming up to summer of university, and that's when I went to yeshiva as well for the first time. Because I kind of embraced this leadership position in Judaism, it kind of motivated me even more to learn more and to practice more and to be more observant. So I went more to keeping Shabbat every week and fully kosher, and kind of like doing more social, some spiritually appropriate behaviors in my life, and you know, yeah, like sinua, like being modest and not, you know, being, you know, with women. So I went down this whole approach, and that's when it all started. And then I decided to go to yeshiva to kind of like solidify my, instead of summer holidays working, I went to yeshiva in Or Sameach.
Take me through that. What happens there?
So I get to Or Sameach, and I've got my luminous vest with shorts on and some flip-flops. And I walk into this shir, and I'm like, okay, here we go. And I loved yeshiva. I loved the guys there. Or Sameach has a lot of really unique personalities. I loved Israel. I loved learning. I still had that spark, which was this feeling of just wanting to learn more. And I really enjoyed I started to learn Gemara there for the first time properly. And I started to love the Talmud. I started to really enjoy pushing myself intellectually in that way, and emotionally and spiritually. And I love the idea of, you know, midot, like character traits. You know, I love self-help books, and I was kind of really I would listen to motivational talks every day anyway. So I love that Judaism had this whole world of not speaking lashon hara, not gossiping, not, you know, not embarrassing another person. There's a whole framework of honoring your parents, and I found it really amazing that there was this framework of how to be in life. And it was really an amazing, eye-opening for me to be in yeshiva, to be in Israel, to be seeing family. I had some family here, and I really had an incredible summer experience. And I really connected even more to this idea of what I am. I want to be a Jew. I want to live and now it went from just like, this is what I'm doing, to what is my future going to start looking like? Where am I going to take this? Like, where is this life? And so when I went back, I also started this organization that I haven't spoken about, but this is where I really started taking next level to really embrace this. This is my life. And I wanted to do and add some motivational speaking. This is where I started to get into telling my story to people. This is where I started to go on different campuses and actually really embrace being in the outreach element and like really forming my foundation of who. That's
what I was also going to ask you next, because I know that, I mean, I'm sure there are people that are listening to this that have never heard of you, but you know, I've seen some of your stuff, and what's so beautiful is about your journey is that you've taken the lessons that you've had and you've used it to give it back. As you were saying, when you were out in the field and you said to God, like, help me out here, and I'm going to go, you know, do my thing. So taking what kind of happens from there, and obviously, Baruch Hashem, you're married and you have 2 beautiful children today and you live in Israel. So what's that process like, and how did you also find your wife?
Yeah. So the rest of university, I really, you know, I started a motivational speaking organization called Motivate with an 8. And we took people and we went to go give motivational talks, because there was 2 elements, I would say. There was a mental health journey that I experienced, which I really felt a big duty after I'd really started to get better. I really hate seeing people suffer mentally. And it became a big thing for me to help people emotionally and motivate people. So that was a big part of my life, and still is, I would say. And the second element is, I didn't know I was Jewish, and now I do. So this is something I didn't have before, and now I have it. So I had an extreme gratitude to the world and Hashem for giving me exposure to Judaism. And I felt like when you have treasure in front of you, you have to take it. Like, it's there. And I was so grateful to have found this gem. And I just thought about it a lot. So that really became the 2 kind of avenues for my life. And to be honest, it never occurred to me, the kind of getting married part. So after like a few years of I really wanted to focus on my Jewish foundation first. And I got to a point where I was ready to start dating. And again, you know, you're in a good place in your life, and And then it got a bit, like my part of my dating experience did get very difficult. And so I'll briefly touch on that because that would lead to, I think, meeting the woman of my life, who's the most amazing person in the world, who doesn't judge me for crying to my High School Musical. Great.
Shout out to the reps.
But I met this other girl beforehand in the dating process, and we was really liked each other, and it was getting very serious. But when her parents kind of saw me or heard about me, they called off the dating. We were very close to kind of getting engaged because I was black, essentially. I mean, it was probably elaborated on a bit more, but because I have this I'm black, and I have an African descendants. It was and really triggered me, understandably, because of everything I'd been through, with that being something that I was very insecure about in some ways. It triggered, like, this was like a point where I was putting myself out there, and it really made me start to feel like, what's going on? Tried so hard to connect to Judaism, connect to God, and like, now this happens, and I went through again another period of a bit of a shorter period of a harder place, because I just really felt internally like completely rejected, and like completely started to doubt all of myself again and what I am. And so, what they say, in the darkest places come the biggest light and the biggest kind of turning points. And I think that's a lesson that I kind of would love for people to kind of understand, is that sometimes you feel like you're in such a place where you have no hope and you can't come out of this, and that's normally where the point. So if you don't give up there, that's where the light comes. That's where the light comes, and it takes you and propels you to an amazing future. And so this is what I want to talk about right now, is this point of like, from the darkest place came the biggest light. And that's also what I like about Hanukkah, because Hanukkah is dafka in the wind, is it literally in the winter, right? And there's a question of like, why wasn't it in the summer? Because the summer it's already light outside, so you have all these Hanukkah lights. But in dafka, it's the darkest time of the year, dafka. And that's because in the darkest time of the year, that's when the biggest light comes out. That's where you could where the light is exposed the most. All right, and I think it's very relevant to what's going on today, and etc. But at that point, it was a very dark place, and I think I was ready to I think that made me ready for what the blessing I was about to receive. And I honestly felt that all of the work I had done, my Judaic journey, had led to this moment of meeting my wife. Like, all of the preparation, all the learning, the person that I'd become because of Judaism, like with my character traits, made me able to now receive and meet this amazing person who's now my wife. And so the story of me meeting my wife is when my wife came to synagogue, where she was on her gap year from Israel. She grew up in Israel, and on her last Shabbat in Israel, she went to London. She went to a synagogue called Ney Israel in Hendon, and it was her last Shabbat. Her friend begged her to come. She didn't really like London. She was going to go back. Her friend begged her to come to the synagogue. She wasn't going to go as her last one. And I happened to also be at the synagogue at that time. And she was looking through the mechitza a bit at me. So that's what she said. She was looking at me. And then she said. And she said she spotted me out of everyone. And she said at the Kiddush afterwards, she came up to me, started speaking to me. And it turns out that she has Chabad background, as have I. And I didn't know the deeper connections on Chabad. I found that afterwards. But she told me she was Chabad light. And I kind of related to that because, I wasn't grossly, like, I didn't know everything about Chabad, but I would consider myself Chabad and like kind of more relaxed kind of just, I love helping people just kind of, and so I connected to her on that, but she left. And I remember looking back as she was leaving, like, just like, when someone stands out, it's like they're glowing. It's like, something's happening here, but I know what it is. So she left, and I didn't know her name, nothing, right? Then a rabbi calls me the next day, called Rabbi Eunuch, and he says, someone called me and said, they met you yesterday, and they want to go on a date with you. And her name's Rena. My wife's like, she goes for when she wants something. And and it turns out he told me that that your mum's family were very close with her family in Stamford Hill. And it turns out that your grandfather was her father's kavata, like took him into the bris, into his bris. And my grandfather was also his head teacher in high school. I'm like, okay, I've got no choice, do I? When you hear that, you have no choice. Okay, so it's done. How am I supposed to say no to go on a date with someone who's my grandfather was their father? And so we started dating. We were talking online only because she went back for a long time, and she came to London. So we met once, and then she went to Israel, and we were talking online, and then she came back for a month, and we got engaged. So we're talking for like a year on the phone, like on WhatsApp. And then COVID happened, obviously. So COVID's crazy because like we couldn't see each other and the world's a mess. So she managed to get here in COVID for a month. Within a month, we like went on tons of dates. And I didn't know we were getting married, by the way. Like I didn't understand the concept of like quick dating. Mm-hmm. But she, in her mind, was like, we're getting engaged this month. And so I'm like a few dates in, I'm like, yeah, this is gonna be like a long-term relationship, you know. I get called by the rabbi like after like 2 weeks. They're like, okay, so when do you want to propose? I'm like, what? Propose? People date for a long, what is it? I'm not ready. I can't do this. I was like, I'm not ready. And he was like, no, like, this is how it works. Like you guys, you got a lot going on. Like you got a lot in common. You really like each other. I was like, yeah, I really like her, but I want to get engaged now. And like after like a week, like I would say that I was forced internally, but it was like a good being forced. Like I think fear was stopping me from going. It wasn't like I had doubts. It was just like, I didn't like, it was scary, the thought of getting engaged, basically. Nothing to do with like it being her. Mm. And so my mum also like was kind of really liked her. And so she kind of was pushing it. And then in a month I was engaged. Like just like what's going on like in my life? Wow. I'm engaged, and then she goes back to Israel and I couldn't get in because of COVID. So then it turns out that her grandfather donated money to a guy who gets people into Israel. So this guy got me into Israel so we could get married. And I was in this like hotel, this Corona hotel. And then she picks me up. It was crazy. And then I went to yeshiva for a year that period, and we got engaged. And we got married a few months later. And at the wedding, essentially, I was walking. It was amazing because my grandparents were there. It was amazing. My grandparents were there. It was so amazing. Family were there. Her parents were there. Like it was wow. His head teacher was walking with him it was crazy. And it was just the most amazing wedding and the most amazing. And at the wedding, I was walking and this guy comes up to me and starts hugging me and crying. I'm like, you're right, mate. I'm about to go to the chuppah. about to get married. Everything going on. He looks at me and goes, I was at your bris. It's a funny, because basically there were 3 people at my bris. There was the rabbi, my mum, and this guy. Because my mum didn't know anyone, right? In Jewish communities, but she still had a bris. So this guy said, I've been following your journey and like I'm very proud of you, and so amazing to see you here, and like that was like a big moment. And so we got married, and obviously, I didn't talk too much about meeting my grandparents and family, but this was a big moment. Like this is where I got married, and this is where I'd say like a completely different chapter started afterwards, which I would say is the happiest that I've ever been and most content till now. I've done a lot of work mentally with therapists and had come to a lot of deep understandings about who I am in my life. And I would honestly say now I feel the most content I've ever felt and most stable. And I feel like I know myself the most than I've ever known myself and who I want to be. And I've got 2 kids now, thank God. And I feel very settled in who I am and where I want to go.
That is so special. And it's the craziness of this entire story of starting off when you're younger and then finding out you're Jewish and then finding out the thing about your father and then going through all the ups and downs. And then to get to a point in your life right now where you're 29, right? And you have 2 kids, Baruch Hashem. You married the girl of your dreams, I guess you could say, and you're living in Israel and you're doing very special things to give back to the people that are going through probably a little bit of what you went through. It's It's very special to see. And I obviously take a lot of inspiration, and hopefully people do. The last thing that I want to ask you is, as you touched on a second ago, you met your grandparents, obviously. And now that you're religious, these are your mom's parents who, as you said before, she's one of 14. And they're a very religious family. So take me through what that was like, kind of getting reunited essentially with that part of your heritage.
This is amazing, because as I told you as well, as I was growing up, I didn't have really family that I knew. So it was like, it was also a big journey for me, like to explore family beyond my siblings and my parents, but also for my mum, because for about 35 years, my mum didn't speak to her parents, or she spoke to her mum here and there, but she didn't really have a relationship with her parents or a lot of her siblings. And so as I was becoming more religious, I wouldn't say, I'm not going to put everything to me becoming more religious, but I think it opened up more of a conversation, because in my family's eyes, my grandparents, is that, this generation is kind of gone, not Jewish anymore, because, maybe they'd gone to a different community, not lived that life. But then now I was more involved in the Jewish community, and I'm speaking, and they see videos of me, and I went to go visit them in New York. They live in Crown Heights in New York. Wow. And when I get in to meet my grandparents, it was very emotional for us. We're both crying. Like, I'd never met my grandmother at this point. And I'm like 20 at this time. And it was a very, very emotional experience. And I met a lot of siblings, and it was kind of like this big thing for me. It's kind of next step in my journey of like reconnecting with my family. And it was always surreal to me. Like, I'm this mixed race African Jew, but then I have like such a deep history of like European Jewry. And it's so funny, because when I tell people I'm Ashkenazi, it's the biggest icebreaker in the world. It's like, no, you're not. And Israel, like, no, you're not Ashkenazi. You're not Ashkenazi. I'm like, yes, I like gefilte fish. I love it. I love gefilte fish. They're like, no, you don't. Like, you're Temani. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm Ashkenazi. And it's just cool to know that I have this like background of big Jewish figures, and my mum now is very close to her parents now, and like she's very close. She goes there a lot. It's like kind of this whole amazing journey of like my mum reconnecting, and the kind of the families reunited, so to speak. And we do a lot more events recently all together, and it's been like a very emotional journey with me, kind of re-exploring all this family, and for my mum, it's been an amazing journey, and for my siblings, kind of reopening all this whole path, and that's why I said before, like at any moment you don't realize how much your life can change. Things can feel impossible, but really there's no such thing as boundaries or barriers when you have Hashem on your side. Like, everything can just turn in any moment, and I'm a big believer of like, if you really believe in Hashem and believe in your journey in this world, anyone can achieve anything. I really do believe that 100%. There's no place that you can be where there's no turning point. And I think that's given me a lot of inspiration and a lot of resilience, that basically I feel like any challenge that comes my way now, I know I have the resilience to get through that. And so it's been really nice with the family, and it's been a beautiful journey. Thank God. It's
so like cool to hear how like Hashem just has his way of connecting people, and then the whole essentially coming full circle. Like, your mom obviously decided to not choose a religious path, and then you just found your way back, and Hashem just had a way of connecting you guys. And it's really special that you have a relationship with them, and that they're part of your life. And even as what you said also, like, your mom didn't really speak to her family for around 35 years. But now part of Hashem's plan is when you kind of got back into the Jewish world, it essentially pulled your mom a little bit back into that relationship, which is honestly very, very like one of those stories that you hear that's like a heartwarming story. I'm going to end off with one final question to you of you've been through a lot in your, Baruch Hashem, your short life so far. Yeah. And for anybody that's listening to this, at whatever stage in life, if you had one message to them that was like, keep this message with you in your pocket for the rest of your life, what would that be?
It's a really, really good question. I think for me, it's that message of, you are incredible. What does that mean by that? I don't mean just your physical body and your mind is incredible. I mean, you paired with your soul and who you are deep down are incredible. You can do anything you want in life. You can achieve wherever you want to go. You know, everyone has their challenges, and I'm not here to say that my challenges are more than yours or that Alvy's are more than mine. It's not about relative challenges. Everyone has their own challenges, their own journey, and you're giving those challenges because you can overcome them, because you can be better, because you can grow. And my message to you is understand that deeply, that whatever you're going through, whatever challenges that you have right now or have had are only a chapter to the story. It's not the conclusion. And it's you have the ability to put the pages in your own book at any moment. You have the ability to turn around and say, I might need help, you know, but I can write the rest of my book. I can write the next few chapters. You are the author of your own book. That's my message.
That is phenomenal. And you are a very special individual, and it has been an absolute pleasure. And also, as you mentioned, you do a little bit of motivational speaking and everything. So wherever people could find you, you'll send me all the links. I'll put it down in the descriptions for people to check it out. And it just really, I start off with a thank you, and I'm going to end off with just, I really appreciate you taking the time, driving all the way out here, and spending the time together. It's been a pleasure. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. And I really enjoyed it. You guys are amazing. It's an amazing mission, amazing message. And I really hope everyone can benefit for what we did here today.
Thank you so much for watching this week's episode. And as I always say, next week is going to be phenomenal. We have so many more guests coming back. And don't forget what's so important for the growth of this page. Write a comment. Tell me if you enjoyed this episode. Like the video. Share it with somebody you know. I'll see you guys next week. Enjoy.